what we eat affects the activity of our gut microbes. Okay. So what is the gut microbiome? Well, it's quite a few different things. It's actually a composite of all the different little beasties that live down there. So bacteria, viruses, yeast, fungi, parasites, good stuff and bad stuff. And we actually have microbiomes in various parts of our body. Like we have a different one in our nasal cavity, a different one in our mouth. Our skin has its own microbiome, and it actually varies in your upper GI down into your lower. So we're going to actually kind of be talking more about the digestive microbiome, and specifically kind of more about the colon, oddly enough. Okay, so where do you get these bugs? Where do they even come from? Well, colonization, the development of these bacteria and all these other bugs, they actually start in pregnancy. So you actually start building some of them in utero, and then you get a whole lot of them when you're born. Okay, so there's a lot of information out there now that natural childbirth, you do get some through a C-section as well, but it's a different composition. And then, of course, you get them through breast milk and your interaction with your parents, and you get most of it in the first 3 years of your life, but then it's constantly changing and fluctuating throughout our lives. It's affected by everything around us. It's affected by what we eat, who we're around, our people, our pets. You may have seen things that children who grow up in households with dogs sometimes seem to have better luck fending off colds and things. So who knew? Antibiotics definitely affects our microbiome, stress, and illness. So like who hasn't been under some stress, right? So, all this stuff affects it. Okay. And so we do have so there's emerging science on the various functions of the microbiome. Okay. So what does it do? Well, it goes out, it harvests and absorbs nutrients and energy. It assists in making vitamins. They have a lot of evidence on vitamin K and lots of the B vitamins. It helps in renewing our gut lining. Okay, so that's very important. It acts as a barrier to pathogens, the bad bugs. So it kind of keeps them from getting into our circulation because they kind of get stuck in the sticky layer there. And it produces these compounds called short chain fatty acids. That's some of that biochemistry, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so we got these good bugs versus the bad bugs. So we have both. And you're not going to ever get rid of all the bad bugs. They're going to be there, okay? So it's kind of like this little gang war, I guess you could say, although there's really not a good side or a bad side totally. But, up top here, the good bacteria, these are some of the ones that we know. And that one down there that's, I'm gonna try and butcher the name of it, Akkermansia muciniphila. Maybe that's how you say it. But anyway, there's some research behind that one that's fairly recent, connecting that with some type 2 diabetes. All right. So sometimes this gut bacteria microbiome gets imbalanced. So you got more bad gut bugs than you got good gut bugs. Hard to say. And there's a lot of evidence out there now, or emerging evidence that this is linked to increased inflammation, obesity, increased insulin resistance, worsening of inflammatory bowel disease, and the development of type 2 diabetes itself, as well as they're also tying it in with everything but the kitchen sink. Alzheimer's are looking at that. So they're looking at maybe it even influences our moods and what we have cravings for. There's a lot of things that are involved with this. Okay. So here's a little picture of it that I got off of Google Images. And it's not exactly quite like this, but when you have a good normal gut microbiome, you have more of the good bacteria. Now there'll be some bad ones in there too. So it's not going to be perfectly pristine like that, but you'd have more of the lactobacilli and the bifidobacteria. But then in the dysbiosis side, you're going to have more of all the other bad ones that are starting to take over, and they're creating more issues. Okay. All right. So what factors are involved in this? What makes our gut get imbalanced? Well, a lot of things. Sometimes too much alcohol is a problem. That affects the health of your intestinal tract. And then there's a lot of emerging science about poor diet. Eating, a Western type diet with a lot of protein, a lot of sugar, a lot of processed foods, that tends to feed some of those bad gut bacteria more than the good ones. High fat, high sugar diets, and diets that are low in this stuff called fermentable fiber. Now, that's going to be important. Also, accidental consumption of chemicals, pesticides on things. We didn't wash it or whatever. High levels of anxiety or stress, cancer, chemotherapy, and the list goes on. Antiviral drugs, radioactive isotopes, hormone therapy, infections, diabetes itself, diseases of the liver and pancreas, medications, especially antibiotics, unprotected sex, presence of intestinal parasites, too much colon cleansing, there's a lot of that going on too. Washes out too much of the good stuff as well as the bad stuff, and inflammatory processes in your intestine. Okay, so this I thought was a nice picture that kind of shows the difference between the lining, that would be like the lining of the intestinal lumen, inside of your intestine. So you notice the one on the left, it has a thick, squishy mucus layer. So you want that because that helps act as a barrier to the bad guys that you don't want to get down and go between the cells in the lamina propria. And so you want nice tight cells there. Okay. So what they're seeing when they're examining the intestinal tract of people with diabetes is that mucosal lining is thinner. It's not as robust. And they're also can be getting these looser connections in the cells down there. So it's what we call leaky gut. Okay. And so we get a lot of bad things that kind of flow through that get into our bloodstream and could create extra cytokines. We've heard about the cytokine storm being a big problem with COVID. And so anyway, there's all this stuff is probably going to be all tied in together. Okay. So here's the thought. Even though this is emerging science and there's not any really large controlled studies with humans, there's some mouse studies and smaller studies with small groups of humans, but a lot of groups, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, they're coming out and saying, hey, let's support the gut microbiome and get a healthy balance. Okay, so here's kind of my thought on it. If you've got the good bacteria, you want them to break down dietary fiber, and they're going to turn it into other stuff that's going to support your gut immunity. Okay, so you got to feed your good bacteria. You got to take care of them, just like you have to take care of your pets and other things. You got to feed things. Okay, so if you take care of them, they're going to break down this fiber that you're going to be feeding them and turn them into these short chain fatty acids. These things act as messengers that communicate with your immune system. So there's a lot of back channel, back talk, and a lot of cross talk down there. And then it also, they kind of tell them, hey, you got to go out and protect against pathogens like salmonella and other invading bad guys. Okay. So what is this short chain fatty acid and why in the heck should you care about it? Well, one of the ones that there's several of them, there's acetate, there's propionate, and there's this one butyrate, which has got some studies behind it that are related to diabetes. It's a major fuel source for the cells lining your large intestine. It's involved in helping improving your immunity and reducing inflammation. Okay, remember inflammation is kind of like the root of all chronic diseases, right? And this is what's kind of new too. It stimulates GLP-1. It's a hormone produced by your gut that helps maintain a healthy balance between your insulin and your glucose levels. Okay. So what do we need to eat to kind of help to feed these good bugs so they can do the job that they need for us? Well, more plant foods, especially those that are rich in fermentable fiber and contain certain phytonutrients. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Less processed food, less saturated fats, nuts, even though they're really high in calories, they're really good for you. Fermented foods, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And, in general, less red meat. Like we haven't heard that before, right? Okay, so let's talk for a second about probiotics versus prebiotics, okay? Probiotics are the good bacteria, so it's a living thing that can help you get a good microbiome balance. And so, we're all probably familiar with those. They have whole rows of them at the various drugstores. They are good, but it's kind of like, it was explained to me like this. It's like your gut is like an Amazon jungle of various, microflora. And you take this little probiotic and it comes in and it has to try to compete against all that. And it's really hard to do that. It can work short term, but for it to work all the time, you'd have to take them all the time. And then how do you know you're getting the right one for you? I mean, everybody's gut microflora is different, and what might work for one person might not work for somebody else very well. Prebiotics, however, are the things in food. So these are non-living things that feed your good bacteria. And there's two main kinds in particular, fermentable fibers as well as polyphenols. Okay. All right. So getting back to the prebiotics, there is a product out there that is in partnership with Mayo Clinic. It's pretty new. It's pretty expensive. It's a special proprietary blend of probiotics. It has that Akkermansia, muciniphila, and 4 other ones. And it has some chicory inulin, although I could not figure out how much it had. I could never actually find the label on it, the backside. So I don't know how much chicory inulin, which is a fiber from the chicory root, that could actually have in that little bitty pill. But it's also pretty expensive. Now, the research behind it says that when they took it for 12 weeks, that it did show a A1C reduction of 0.6%. Okay, but that's 12 weeks, so that's 3 months. So 165 times 3 months, it's going to cost you about $500 to get your A1C down 0.6%. Not sure that's that great of a cost investment, but there it is. They do have a very good website though, Pendulum Life. They have a lot of good blogs, and they really have very nice graphics of the science supporting this. So I give them credit for that, and they're on the cutting edge. Okay. Here's another way that you can help support your gut: eat more fermented foods. So if you ever go to Pepper Place on Saturday, you've probably seen the tables of the folks selling the kombucha, which is a fermented drink. Not my favorite, but I think the one with ginger is pretty good. Sauerkraut, kimchi. Kimchi is a Korean pickle that's a naturally fermented pickle. Old-fashioned pickles. Now, these are the kind that are done where you take your vegetables and you put them in a big crock with salt water and spices and stuff, and you just let them ferment on their own at room temperature, and then you put them in a cold place. I made some this summer. They were good, but they were a little scary. They start bubbling up. It's kind of like a science project. But they were good. I didn't get many of them though, because my cucumber plants got pickle worm. And so the pickle worm ate more cucumbers than I was able to eat, but at least we tried. Miso, that's a soybean paste that's used a lot in flavoring and making soups and vegetarian cooking. It's pretty tasty. It's really salty though. Yogurt that has live active cultures, and kefir, which is a yogurt-based drink. Okay, so you can try that. Fermentable fibers themselves might be a little bit more accessible because they're going to be in everyday foods. These are the dietary fibers that are, again, they're digested by your gut-friendly bacteria way down in the colon. So some of the names of some of these things: pectins, beta-glucans, guargone, inulin, oligofructose. Okay, what are the foods they're in? Veggies, fruits, whole grains, and beans. Okay, all right. So we're going to go back just a second to this other concept about the phytonutrients, polyphenols, okay? And then we'll get more into the fermentable fibers, because polyphenols are antioxidants, which means they help prevent disease and they help fight free radicals and damage and things like that. And they also are being shown to help foster your gut biome. They support the gut biome as well. Okay, so polyphenols are the special kind of phytonutrients that you're going to find in fruits, vegetables, herbs, spices, tea, dark chocolate, and red wine. Okay, any diet that includes a little dark chocolate and red wine, I support. Okay, now as far as the prebiotic fermentable fiber, you're going to get that a lot in garlic, leeks, onions, anything in that family. Those are particularly high in the vegetable family. Broccoli, cauliflower, cabbages, kale, mustard greens. Some of these things we don't eat that often. Like, can't tell you the last time I ate a Jerusalem artichoke or burdock. I'm not even sure what burdock is, but most of the other ones are really familiar. Sweet potatoes, those kinds of things. Asparagus. Asparagus is, really easy to get now. I think it's beautiful in the store year round. Butternut squash, that's a big fall thing. peas, mushrooms. You can see the list there. So there's a lot of different vegetables that are particularly high in these particular types of fermentable fibers. Fruits. Now, fruits are going to have the polyphenols and the fermentable fibers. So that's a nice double whammy, especially the darker colored fruits. So your berries, all kinds of berries tend to be high in both. So apples, bananas, grapefruit, stone fruits, all the stone fruits. Seedless watermelon, like I can't understand why it's seedless versus the regular. I don't know, that's what it said. And most dried fruits. Okay. Okay. And then whole grains. Okay. So, there's about 21, 22 different grains. Amaranth, barley. Now, barley is one of these things you can get in a quick cooking form, and it's really delicious. It's a nice fall thing. You can have it instead of rice. You can add it to soups and stews. I do recommend if you use barley, though, that you cook it separately and then add it because it has a tendency to just keep getting bigger. Like if you put something in the refrigerator that had cooked barley in it, the next day you take it out, it's going to be all like swollen up usually. The one thing on that list I'm not real familiar with is freekeh. I did look it up. I'd be interested to see if any of y'all have had it. It's actually a form of wheat, durum wheat, that is harvested. It's Middle Eastern and North Africa, I think. It's harvested green, and then they kind of smoke it and burn it and rub off I think it's called the chaff. So it's got a smoky kind of flavor. It does take a good while to cook. So that's one reason it wouldn't be real popular. It takes about 45 to 50 minutes, kind of like brown rice. And it's supposed to be kind of chewy too. So that may be another reason why it's not real popular with a lot of folks. But anyway, these particular types of whole grains that you see here are the ones that are particularly high in the fermentable fiber. Okay, and nuts. Okay, so nuts have fermentable fiber too. They are really high in calories, so you have to be careful. You can't just eat a whole can a day, but they are really, really good for you. Walnuts and pecans have that double whammy because they're also rich in polyphenols. So they got polyphenols and fermentable fiber, so they're really good. And it's pecan season, right? Okay. So as far as beans, I never knew the difference between legumes and pulses. Now I do. I looked it up. Legume is the whole plant itself with the stalks and stems and all that. The pulse is the actual seed. So that's the seed in the pod. So we call them here beans, right? But pulses are, all different kinds of beans. And that would also include peas and lentils and English peas and hummus, which is, of course, just a bean spread, bean dip. So canned beans, those are really easy. You don't have to plan the day before to make them. They're fine, but just remember that a lot of the good fiber in there is in the liquid. It's called the aquafaba. So you want to try and use at least some of that too to get those prebiotic fibers, okay? And a lot of people say, I can't eat beans. They're too gassy for me. Well, this is a good tip that I read. Try eating like just a spoonful a day. Okay, spoonful a day for the next few weeks, and your body will kind of get accustomed to it, and you will be fostering those good bacteria that use that type of fiber, and you'll get adjusted to it. So sometimes if you can't eat certain fibers, it's because you might have some dysbiosis down there. Okay. And then there's some evidence about replacing saturated fat with unsaturated fats. And of course, we know that's good for our cardiovascular health, but it also has to do with these toxins called endotoxins in the gut. So saturated fat causes our gut to absorb more endotoxins, and those create or promote more inflammation, damage cells, and increase insulin resistance. So there's some emerging evidence of another reason why we don't need to be eating a lot of saturated fat. So it will also kind of foster the growth of those gut bacteria that make more of those endotoxins, and those tend to be higher in people with type 2 diabetes because they have more inflammation. So saturated fats, I'm sure y'all know where they are. We need to be trying to eat less of our red meats, full fat dairy products. Try and go with the lower fat ones, coconut oil, palm oil, the skin of poultry, chicken, and turkey too, butter, and shortening. Now, shortening used to have a lot of this stuff called trans fats, but they banned that. So they just kind of went back to sneaking in more saturated fat into it. Sneaky of them, isn't it? So the good kind of fats that you want to replace those with, Those that are nuts and seeds, avocados, salmon and other fatty fish, olive oil, safflower oil, and other good quality oils. Your best oils are the more expensive ones. Unfortunately, they tend to be cold pressed, not chemically pressed, not chemically processed. You lose a lot of the good stuff in chemically processed cheap oils. So good oils are more expensive, but I don't know about you guys. I try and go for the BOGOs at Publix, because you get 2 nice sized bottles for $8 instead of 1. And they keep really well if you keep them in a cool, dark place. Okay. So there's a bunch of anti-inflammatory diets. They abound. Okay. So 2 of them I'm not really real hip on are the Whole30, because it says you can't have any legumes, grains, or dairy at all. It's like, what? And then the anti-inflammatory diet, anti-inflammatory plan, that allows it doesn't allow a lot of things. It allows no legumes, grains, dairy, eggs, nuts, seeds, vegetables in the nightshade family, olive oil, certain spices, and chocolate. Well, that's a downer for sure. I know that that's pretty popular. I think that's the diet that the football player Tom Brady follows, but it's extremely restrictive. And maybe he needs it, but I don't think the rest of us really do. Some better anti-inflammatory diet options include the Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet, Dr. Weil's anti-inflammatory diet, vegetarian diets, plant-based, vegan diets, and Eating Well is a magazine that's closely connected with Cooking Light. In fact, they may have merged. They have an immune boosting meal plan that's really good. You can pick your calorie option. It will give you various meal plans. I think it relies a little too much on pasta maybe, but by and large, it's got some really good recipes. And the way they do their plans, I like too, because it doesn't have like a different lunch every day. Like it has a lunch that you can repeat for 3 days in a row, because, who's going to make something different every day? That's a lot of grocery shopping. This is from his website, Dr. Weil's anti-inflammatory food pyramid. And it makes a lot of sense for the most part. I'm not quite sure why it says you have to have your pasta al dente, maybe because it retains more fiber if it's a little chewier. So that probably is the reason behind that. And then you go on up your healthy fats, your fish, your shellfish. So these, of course, are the order of that you would eat more of the bottom, less of the top. And then apparently cooked Asian mushrooms, which I figure those are shiitake, and I'm sure there's some other ones. I know there are enoki, there's some other ones. Apparently those are super good for you. They have a whole level just to them. And then other proteins, but 1 to 2 a week. You don't get too much from those. Healthy herbs and spices, garlic. I did want to mention something about garlic that I read recently, and I do believe it's true. The compound in it, and I'm probably not pronouncing this right, it's called allicin. My name is Allison, so I should be able to pronounce that right, but it's not spelled the same way. It's released by crushing the garlic, and it takes about 10 minutes to develop. So when you crush that garlic to use in your cooking, try and do it at the beginning and let it sit for a little while, because to get that benefit of that prebiotic, you do, or prebiotic, you do need to let it set for a little while. Okay. Tea, all kinds of tea, but specifically white, green, and oolong, according to Dr. Weil. Supplements, I don't know. I mean, I do take some. I think most of us do, but I'm not sure it needs a whole line there. A little bit of red wine, not more than 1 or 2 glasses a day, so not a half a bottle a day, and then a little bit of plain dark chocolate would be good. So again, any diet that allows you to have a little bit of chocolate and a little red wine, I can get behind that. Okay, so how much fiber do I need? Now I'm probably dating myself. This is from 1989. Maybe some of y'all remember the famous SNL skit, Colon Blow. By the end of it, he's sitting on top of 80 bowls of bran cereal. It's hilarious. But how much fiber do we actually need in a day? A lot. All right, so you're supposed to get between 25 to 38 grams of fiber a day. Now that's the recommended daily allowance. That's just what we're supposed to be getting, everybody. And that's a whole lot of fiber. So it's a whole lot of food. Well, maybe not so much. It depends on your perspective, but it's 2 to 3 whole grain servings a day, 1 to 2 servings of beans every day. So you need to at least get a serving of beans a day, at least 3 servings of vegetables a day, at least 2 fruits, and 1 serving of nuts or seeds. Okay. So I must admit, there are some days when I'm really busy that I don't necessarily get all of that every day, but we need to try and strive for that. And then I can imagine some of y'all are saying, but I'm supposed to be on a low carb diet for my diabetes. How does that work with this? Well, actually, if you add up the lower end of these, it's about 90 grams of carb, which anything under 100 grams of carb a day is really low. Okay, so I know people think one of the concerns that I have about low carb diets is that people are not getting the things that they need to support their gut immunity. Okay, if you're cutting out all the beans, all the grains, all the fruits, because a lot of people think that they're not allowed to have fruit when they have to be on a low carb diet, then you're cutting out a lot of stuff that's really beneficial for your gut. So try not to do that. Okay. All right, so now we get into some of the fun stuff. This is a healthy plate planner. And so it's a way that we're trying to encourage people to kind of shift from instead of meat and starch, kind of get the meat and starch over here on this side of the plate, less of the meat for sure, and get half that plate from vegetables. Okay, so that's a good visual kind of think about. Take your plate, kind of cut it in half visually, try and get half of it from the vegetables, and try and get a little bit less meat, a little less starch. So that's a good move to using more plant-based for a lot of folks. Okay, these are some examples. If we look around at them though, like if you look at the top left, looks like some nice beef tenderloin or something. You could still probably go with a little bit less meat, maybe a little bit more of the grain there, but you kind of get the idea. The one on the top right is a salad and some brown rice and some salmon. Okay, that seems doable. The one down at the bottom is a small piece of chicken, some sweet potato. Well, you can see what there is, but a lot of vegetables. You see, there's a lot of vegetables. The one on the left, I would think it probably needs some black beans or something and some salsa and maybe a little cheese on those tacos. But at any rate, the idea is a lot more vegetables, a lot less of the protein and the things that don't support good health as much, gut health. Okay. Well, what else can you do to support your immunity? Okay, because everybody wants to stay well over the winter, right? I'm trying to avoid viruses as much as we can or avoid getting sick from them. I mean, we're going to be exposed to things a lot anyway, generally. And beyond the usual things, washing your hands, social distancing, wearing your mask, COVID, there's a lot of evidence that you need to get good sleep, good quality sleep, adequate good quality sleep. You need to manage your stress. So you got to figure out a way that works for you that's healthy. Drinking 4 glasses of wine is not a good way to manage your stress. But got to find things that calm you down. Escapes. We need good, healthy escapes. Exercise. You need to get at least, persons with diabetes and prediabetes need to get at least 150 minutes of exercise per week. Now, it doesn't have to be, like 30 minutes, 5 days a week. It can be 10 minutes here, 10 minutes here, but by the end of the week, it really needs to add up to at least 150 minutes. And, as far as all the different supplements and stuff that you can take, there is some pretty good evidence that if your vitamin D is low, that puts you a higher risk for a weakened immune system. And, get your vitamin D level checked. If it's low, take some D3 per your healthcare provider's recommendations. I was in that category and I've got mine back up and I just take it a few nights a week now. You don't have to take large doses for a long amount of time. Okay, and don't smoke. Can't say that enough, right? Okay, so here are a couple consumer-friendly sites for reliable information on diabetes. The Diabetes Food Hub is actually run by the American Diabetes Association, and it's really nice. You can actually join into it and save recipes and plan meals, and has a lot of good recipes in it. The ones that kind of came up on the screenshot aren't particularly my favorites, but it's really easy to maneuver around in there. And then Diatribe is also a good website, and they have a very good explanation with good graphics on the gut microbiome and how it relates to diabetes. So I think you might enjoy that. Okay. And this, I find this quite delightful. This is Kylie Flavel is a blogger who lives in Italy, and she has a beautiful way of describing things, and she's actually a very good filmmaker. She uses oh, like most of them do now. She uses the drones, and she has beautiful landscape, and she just has a really nice way about her. She had a video earlier this year, immunity boosting soup for the soul. It's really delightful. The soup, I actually made it. It made a ton. My husband and I thought we would freeze some, but it was so good we ate it all in like 2 3 days. It was really good. Now, one thing I did kind of depart from her recipe is I didn't put pancetta in it, although I'm sure it's delightful. But you know, pancetta is an Italian unsmoked bacon. I just decided, hey, I'm not going to use it. And instead of putting pasta, because minestrone would have pasta, I used some cooked barley. And we really like that. So I cook the barley separately. I get that quick cooking kind. It takes like 20 minutes to cook, and then just kind of threw it in there towards the end. It has a ton of vegetables in it. It's really well seasoned. It's pretty easy to make, not a lot of steps. So I would encourage you to check that one out. Um, she does tend to kind of drone on a little bit. So if you want to get to the quick and get to the video, go on into 12 minutes into it is where she starts cooking it. But it's very relaxing. I find her demeanor very relaxing. So for me, it's a stress management to watch her do her thing. And she's very passionate about it too. Okay, so that's really the end of what I have. So we have lots of time for questions and comments. I'm not going to say that I'm going to have answers to everything, but I certainly will try. And also I wanted to give you some references, and so you kind of know where I'm coming from on that. So I included some of those for you, and we can